Hi, I am here with Sonia Story, who will be joining us next week for our upcoming Lunch and Learn with her webinar, Using Innate Sensory Motor Interventions to Help Overcome ADHD Symptoms, Rationale and Supporting Evident. So welcome, Sonia. Good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Heather. Really happy to be here.
Good. Thanks. I'd love for you to give our viewers just a brief introduction to your background and expertise in this area.
Yeah, well, I first started, it was like 2006, and I ended up taking a brain gym course, and I went through that whole training to become an instructor. And as part of the end of that training, I learned about this thing called primitive reflexes. And I had studied biology and psychology in university, and I was amazed by how much I didn't know about primitive reflexes and how important they were. So then that took me on a whole journey, and I just was in a really fortunate time of life where I was able to take a lot of courses. So I took course after course after course, and about halfway through, or 2/3 of the way through that training, I realized, wow, I am learning from some of the best mentors in the world in this whole field. And it was such a blessed time, and I've just been having super fun with it ever since. And some sadness too, because I just wish everybody had this. First of all, I wish we didn't need it for our children, but then I would wish that every child has access to it. So I started to ask myself this question, like, why isn't this more well known? And somebody needs to get the word out about this. And then every time I attended another course, I was like, oh, this is great. And this is the very best part of this course and the most helpful, where you get the most results in the shortest amount of time. So I just started putting all that together. I had some mentors who were really focused on play and joy, and that needed to be primary. Then I had others who were really technical about, well, you know, it needs to be this for the reflex pattern. So I just started diving into reflexes and the innate rhythmic movements, and I just found it to be so fascinating. I had such good results myself doing these movements. And then I started working with my own children, with private clients. I started teaching more and more. And then I set out to teach parents, but it turns out that there were so many OTs and PTs who wanted to take the courses that I was teaching. And I said, well, don't you learn this stuff when you go to OT school? And they said, no, we learn what a primitive reflex is. We learn how to test for them. We know that they're soft neurological signs, but we don't know what to do with them after that. And so I thought, wow, there really is a need here. And then I created a course, and that's the Brain and Sensory Foundations curriculum. It's actually 2 courses, and we've had such good feedback. It's a really good, unique set of tools, and I've been teaching that since, I think 2008 is when I started, but it had a different title. And then I've just been refining it ever since, and we get really good results. I'm really blessed and super happy to share whatever I can.
Awesome. I'd love for you to tell me more about innate sensory motor interventions. Why that terminology? Or tell me, expand on that a little bit.
Right. So there are many sensory motor innovations or interventions. So what I'm focusing on is the innate movements, and these are movements that all babies will do as long as they're healthy, not stressed, and as long as they have room to move and they're not hindered in their movement. And it's fascinating how deeply and profoundly these movements affect us. And the main thing that I found so incredible was that even though these are the movements that are innately only done during infancy, our bodies and our brain and our sensory system will respond to them later in life. So we can actually make up for gaps in development. We can help with trauma release, and we can definitely help with things like that cascade of symptoms that we call ADHD. So when I say innate sensory motor, I'm talking specifically about the template, the human movement template that's already there in our brain. And that includes innate rhythmic movements, which are fascinating, and they're an enormous help for reflex integration. They're really the foundation for that. And then the reflexes, which most of us are familiar with, and then also the developmental movements. So it's been a wonderful journey to study this and use it and see the applications. And the main thing is how it's helping. So we're going to cover some of that in the course.
I know we have 1 hour, so our lunch and learns are 1 hour from 11:30 to 12:30 Central Standard Time. And I'd love for you to give a little bit more information on what people can expect in that 1 hour.
Right. Well, I started getting fascinated with some of the research around the symptoms we call ADHD. And we all see this and we all know it if we're around children, right? So ADHD goes hand in hand with sensory issues. It goes hand in hand with sensory motor challenges, challenges with balance, and it goes hand in hand with learning challenges. So all these things, one of the core underlying things that you can find in the research very easily is that all these things, whether it's ADHD symptoms, the lack of focus and attention, hyperactivity, sensory issues, learning issues, balance and coordination issues, they all at the base of them go hand in hand with unintegrated reflexes. That's these movements that didn't get enough practice or enough use in infancy, or they somehow got hindered in infancy. And posture has a thing to do with this also. So all these things tie into these innate sensory motor movements of the template that we're talking about. And the fascinating thing is when we give these movements, the functioning starts to come in. So we get better posture, we get better balance, we get better coordination, we get more calm, less anxiety. And I even have some great case studies. One I'm going to share that is from Dr. Blomberg, who's one of my mentors. And he is a very unusual psychiatrist. He's passed away actually in May of last year, but he was so unusual because here he was, a psychiatrist, but he didn't prescribe drugs for ADHD. What he did was he gave these movements, and he even gave the movements to kids who had been on ADHD for years, and the medication wasn't really helping them. And they were able to even become free of their diagnosis. Like they went back and they got tested and shown that they were free of any of those symptoms. And these were kids who had some wild behavioral disturbances. So that's the other thing that is so important, is that we can help children feel safe and comfortable in their body so that we don't have to have these more extreme behavioral issues, which are so stressful for everyone. But those, I think, directly come from being afraid and having really uncomfortable sensory experiences. Yeah.